All right. Welcome back to another episode of Side Note, the podcast dedicated to underground dance music and all things related. Pleasure today to introduce to you or to bring on Collin Rodriguez, a.k.a. DJ Collin Reeve. Awesome, man. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming.
I'm excited to be here. And
of course.
Appreciate you.
So a little bit of different vibe, so you are a DJ, but also you are an audio engineer who's been involved with a ton of events throughout the region. So I guess just to start off, like, didn't you do something last night? Like, what was that all about?
Yeah, I was out last night. Luckily it was an early night. But this gal I met through the scene, she's like an actual like fine artist. So I met her while she was vending at a warehouse party when we just like connected and stuff. And then so she was doing her own kind of like art and music showcase event last night. And so like I provided sound and engineered for all the bands and stuff there.
And then like what kind of background do you need to kind of break into that?
My background is probably not the most traditional background for this kind of industry. I'm mostly self-taught when it comes to the like live production side of things. I did go to school for music production, which is how I came to LA. But that's more like studio engineering, which there is like crossover to the live engineering. It's more or less the same concepts. But just different tools and practices and stuff like that. But yeah, most of my knowledge and what I've now used today is either self-taught or learned through like just on-site, on-hand experience. Just working for venues and companies and things like that. So just learning as much as I can, like in the field and stuff.
Got it. Yeah, and you had kind of, before you came on, you had given me some of your background in terms of, how you got into this. So maybe, talk about it for the folks out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to go way back to the beginning, I guess that would be like when I was first introduced to like electronic music and DJing and stuff was from my uncle, who still currently lives up in Tahoe.
So like cool hippie uncle?
Yeah. And at the time, I mean, he's still very much in music, but at the time he was, like DJing at clubs and stuff like in Reno stuff like that. Okay. My whole family is very like artistic and, different forms. That was his art form, was more the music side of things. We went to visit him for like Thanksgiving when I was like in 7th grade. And like I was like playing instruments in bands and stuff, and so we were like talking about music and whatnot, and he showed me his little music studio, which was for him like his DJ setup and everything.
And what kind of tunes was he playing?
This was like 2006, 2007, something like that.
Okay.
2006. So it was like he was more into, I don't know, like DJ Colette, like Mark Farina.
Okay, like house.
Like house music
then,
of the time.
Yeah, what was then referred to, I guess maybe deep house?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And like, this was again, like at the time when like, for me listening to music, I had my little like blue Sony Walkman like CD player, and like you could put it on your hip, but if you like walked too hard, it would like skip the disc and stuff. So like him showing me how to like scratch and manipulate, I was like, what? You can like reverse a CD and like not just like completely fuck it up. Like I was like mind blown. And he even only had like one CDJ.
Using like a CDJ.
Which he had one CDJ because like this was still when they were like not really like as accessible as they are to like the population as they are nowadays. So it was still like his main setup was vinyl, but he had like one, and he was like, check it out, like you can do this with a CD. And I was like, what? And I went home and I was just like so intrigued by the whole thing of, manipulating music and being able to like perform with tracks and stuff like that. And that was just kind of my like just like hook and just like drag me into it. And he sent me home with a couple of CDs, and I would just like load them into my mom's car and would just like play them on repeat like every day.
All right. So what were the early inspiration CDs?
Oh gosh. So he sent me home with a Mushroom Jazz.
Okay. Mark Farina.
Mark Farina Mushroom Jazz CD, a DJ Colette CD, Benny Benassi. What else? Those were like the three that like I would like definitely just like cycle through.
Got it. Yeah, because everyone has like whatever personal to them sort of iconic electronic albums that really kind of sealed their love of it, and so I love kind of learning from people like what it was for each person. So, I mean, those are certainly like iconic and respectable kind of artists / albums. So awesome.
Yeah, and since like from then on, it was kind of my like secret pleasure kind of, because I grew up in the Bay Area, so like up there, especially at the time, was like just rap and hip hop, and it was like specifically like Bay Area rap and hip hop, and so like trying to be like, I listen to house music. People were like, fuck is that?
Really?
Like,
was this before like burner culture had kind of proliferated everywhere?
Yeah, like, I mean, even now, you know, like I've been in LA for 5 years, and during that 5 years, like the electronic music scene has definitely, I mean, it's still not as like vast as it is here, but it's definitely like grown a lot more up there. Like I've seen, you know, people like that I have met, who like are doing like renegade things like up in like the Bay Area, and there's, you know, like warehouse parties and stuff like that just did not exist. At least, or if it did, like I was just like so unaware of it. But yeah, so like, you know, I was kind of like lonesome in my love for electronic music where I was living. And then in high school, when I started going to like dances and stuff, I realized that like the like middle-aged dudes who were playing just like...
Wait, were they hiring like wedding DJs?
Essentially, yeah. They were playing like, you know, like... just all, like, exactly. It's like the top 40 like wedding playlist. And then there was like this one group of, at the time they were seniors. I think I was a sophomore at the time. And they kind of started like DJing, but it was really just like taking a crossfader and just like going back and forth between like two tracks of like completely different BPMs, different genres. And I was like, the heck is this? This isn't DJing. Like my uncle taught me how to really DJ. And I was all, you know, like,
I know what's up.
I know what's really DJing. This isn't really DJing. So like I convinced, you know, a couple of my friends and I to pool our like, you know, minimum wage paychecks, to like invest in some DJ gear. And
nice collective DJ gear.
We're like, okay, like I make $300 every 2 weeks. You make, you know, whatever. We can like pool it together and buy. I remember we bought like a little Serato controller and some like Mackie Thumb speakers, and, you know, it's like whatever we could afford, and started like DJing like our own dances, and then like throwing our like house parties and stuff. Cause like, especially where I grew up, there was no nightlife at all. Like I grew up in Marin County, which is very suburban. And so there's like, you know, like a dive bar that stays open, like in each kind of like little, like, you know, section of the county, but there's no clubs, there's no nightlife. Yeah,
it's essentially kind of like the like Newport Beach, right?
Yeah. So, like we were just, it was either like go get like drunk on a hill somewhere, or like when someone's parents were out of town, we would like throw little house parties. And so we would always just like bring our DJ equipment and like DJ like little house parties and stuff like that. And then whenever I could, I would like sneak in a couple like house tracks in with all the rap and hip hop we were playing.
Dude, I totally relate with you on the school dances. So I feel like that was my intro to DJing too. Like I landed the gig doing like junior prom or some shit. And like there was someone else, another kid who was also like booked. Like, so we shared the time slot.
Yeah.
But the other kid, he showed up with like turntables and like was rocking like real like house and trance music and actually like beat matching. And I remember being like so like sort of blown away and like enamored with it. But the dance floor like completely fucking emptied out, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, well, guess I'll go on now. And, you know, like first thing I put on is like fucking Cisco Thong Song or something. And everyone comes rushing back.
Yeah.
And it was like this weird sort of like kind of double-edged sword feeling where it was like, oh, okay, I got them back, but also I hate them now.
Like, I hate this music that I'm like playing. And yeah.
I don't like this music. Like they totally just like bought it, like hook, line, and sinker. And I think from then on, that's sort of like established like the whole sort of like music nerd mentality. And that's not to say like that's where people should be by any means. Like I can't say that being a music nerd has served me in any real like shape or form, but I feel like that was certainly the inception of it. It was like putting on the thong song and be like, oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know the deal.
Yeah. It was always like, like seeing how far I could get before people started leaving the dance floor. Like, okay, can I like play 2 house songs? Can I play 3? Like, how far can I take this before people start complaining?
Yeah, and are people like, are you playing techno?
Drake
like,
back?
why are you playing techno?
Yeah.
Like, everything was just like techno generically.
Yeah, I could usually get away if I played like a remix of like a popular like songs that could like at least like sing along to it. But yeah, like that was always a challenge. And then, like once high school ended, my, like the friends that I had done this little thing with, they all went off to college. I stayed up in Marin to go to community college up there for a couple of years, and just kind of like trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. Right. This was also when I started working, also like in a different form of the event industry, doing like beverage catering.
Okay.
So we would, like just
like
bartend. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. But it was like, it was just like bartending for like, corporate events or weddings or like, private parties or whatnot. And so that was like a different kind of perspective in.
Okay, yeah. So I love that. That's not necessarily
and, like events,
music, but I'm sure they're like amazing stories.
There was a lot. There was, especially up in the Bay. We'd be all over like Silicon Valley doing like huge things. I remember like bartending backstage at like a Ariana Grande like concert one time, and like I remember like giving her a bottle of water. I was like, oh my gosh, you're so small. But and it was like a lot of cool things. And like
what's the scene like? Backstage or somewhere like that. Like, is it as crazy as people would imagine, or low key, or somewhere in between?
It's funny because like there's memes that circulate within like event production, like groups, where it's like, but people think backstage is like, and it's like a bunch of like bottles being popped and stuff. And it's like backstage really like, and it's just like a bunch of dudes just like exhausted and like pass out in a bunch of like cases or boxes or like, like sitting on an egg crate or something. And like, it's like not very glamorous.
Okay.
I did a lot of cool work for that. I was there for like 4 years, 3 or 4 years doing that. And then, at the same time, I was like cycling through just like, do I want to be a photographer? Do I want to like do this or that? And like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And then, again, because music was like the one thing that was like always there, like throughout anything else. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just gonna take some more like music classes. I found this one called like Desktop Musician. It was essentially like Introduction to Ableton.
Okay.
And like, because I'd kind of dabbled with like, garage band and stuff throughout high school, but like never really got into it. And especially back then, like the plethora of YouTube tutorials that exist nowadays didn't really exist back then. So it was really hard to try to like teach yourself through watching YouTube videos. It was, kind of bouncing around to try to figure out like just like random little bits of information, but it was never really like cohesive. Like,
I've certainly been there myself, and I think I was able to produce something using my YouTube education, but I can't say it was
it's tough. Good. It's really tough. Yeah. Especially when it's like you have an idea and then just like the program is just like the roadblock to you like expressing that, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I have this sound in my mind and like I just can't manipulate the program in the way that I want to manipulate it in order to like get this idea out. And then you just like lose the inspiration because you're trying to like fiddle with the software, and it's just like so frustrating. But yeah, so I took that class, and then that was like, after that I was like, you know what, I'm going to like just commit to this, just stop wasting my time, like figure out what I want to do, just like commit to this one thing. And then, like obviously I had discovered like Icon Collective, cause that was, like the biggest thing, like in terms of like, the like electronic event or, music production
so
schools.
maybe I'm going to show my like ignorance here, but what is that?
Icon Collective is probably the most like, I guess like famous kind of like music production. I guess you call it like a trade school thing. Cause it's not like it's not like
HubSpot.
Kind of, yeah. It's not like a proper university. It's like, like a 1 to 2 year, like accredited program or whatever thing. I think it's up in Van Nuys, or like North Hollywood, Van Nuys area. But it's production. It's just like solely like Ableton music production, and it's targeted towards like the electronic music scene. Like, like they always, like, oh, Jaws graduated from here, and like so-and-so, like this famous person went to Icon and stuff like that. So I looked into that because that was like the first thing that popped up in the Google search. But it didn't really seem like my like vibe. And then I found this other one called Point Blank, which is, the same type of school, but it seemed a little bit more like my vibe with just like their like, philosophy and all that stuff. And like, oh, Claude Von Stroke went to that one or whatever. So like, I'm going to go there. Okay. And so when I went to their Los Angeles campus, because they originated in the UK, and when I went to the LA campus, they're still like in the early stages of the school getting up and running and stuff. So it was like not like as glamorous as maybe Icon could have been. But I loved it. And
as long as you're getting the skills, right?
Yeah. And I, like met some great people. I moved down to start school in September 2016. And I had this whole idea of like, I'm just going to like cut all ties to the Bay Area and like start fresh and like do my own thing. And like, I had known a couple people who'd moved down here before me to also get into the music industry. I'm like, I don't even care. Like, I'm just going to like do my own thing. I'm not going to try to like leech onto what they're doing, whatever. But then pretty quickly it was just like trying to hit up anybody that I knew. Cause from back home, so I was like, man, this city is lonely and it's like chaotic and such a just a completely different universe from my little like peaceful like suburban life that I am leaving. So I hit up one of my like, I would say like at the time it was just like a guy that I went to school with and like knew about him, but we just like just did in different worlds. He was like, he like played baseball and I was like the yearbook photographer. So we just like didn't really like, coexist in high school. But yeah, I hit him up and I was just like, hey dude, I moved down to LA, just a little bit ago, like want to get a beer and like catch up, whatever. So we did, and he brought along one of his other like music industry friends. We just like hung out, and then like a couple weeks later, I get a text from an unknown number. It was like, hey, this is like Michael from like, the other week when we like, got a drink. He's like, like we're going like camping this weekend out, like near Joshua Tree, and like, Jake said, that you have some like speakers and DJ equipment. Like, would you like want to come and like bring your gear? And I was like, fuck yeah, I was a Boy Scout, dude. Like, I'm always down to go camping, but like, why should I like? I was like, if everyone like brought my like CDJs and like speakers and stuff like camping, because all the stuff I used to have from like high school, like
so they were throwing a renegade party.
Yeah, I didn't know about this. So this was like November, so like pretty, like only a couple months after I'd moved down. But yeah, like I met them at like a gas station here in the city, and then just like followed them out to Joshua Tree, and we like, navigate out through the desert and stuff, and like pull up to this like abandoned RV, and we're like, this is cool. Let's like, bust out the like big side window and like set up the DJ booth in here and just like play out of like this abandoned RV thing. And that was like my first, like desert renegade experience. So this was
like 2016, 2017?
Yeah, November 2016. Okay. Yeah. And I just remember like, it was a pretty impromptu thing. It wasn't like a large ticketed thing. It was just a bunch of friends that were like, had been going to festivals together and stuff. And they had like their kind of like festival squad and whatnot, so that was kind of my like debut into that whole thing. And then I remember like Sunday when we were all like just like recovering and coming down from our trips and stuff, we were just like, dude, we should do this again, but like plan it a little bit better next time, and like maybe I can invite some more people. And then that was kind of like how that whole crew got started. And with that was called, we called it the Jackson Collective, and then eventually called like the desert party Jackson tree, because it was like, oh, the Jacksons go to Joshua Tree. Like,
all right, that
Jackson
makes me
tree.
so happy to hear that. And I feel like you and I kind of have a lot of overlap in terms of, so I roll with a crew called the Ars Collective that throws renegade parties in the desert and the forest. And they're I'm a little older than you, and they're a little older than me. So they've been doing it since like the early 2000s. So like they had their like 20th installment a couple of years ago. But it makes me so happy to know that other people are doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
We all know about Moon Tribe, and then there's like other kind of offshoots that we've heard about.
Yeah.
To know that there are also just groups of friends who are like going out there, like making it happen and doing it for the love of the beat, you know, definitely like gives me joy.
Yeah, no, it's wild. Like, you know, after the amount of time that I've been here, like, you know, I always think like, oh yeah, like I know like what, you know, the scene, I know what's out there. But then like, I feel like every month I discover like a new party or like a new thing. I'm like, how are there still like things popping up? Like, this is wild.
In this like post sort of, you know, pandemic or post vax world, you know, there's just too many events now. Right?
It is wild.
Like we went from like, will I ever hear amplified sound ever again? I remember like legit wondering that, you know? And to now it's just like, the number of parties, and like a lot of them, to your point, you know, are desert renegades or forest renegades.
Yeah. I feel like the renegade life kind of like had like a resurgence recently because, you know, like of all the restrictions of like proper venues.
And it's outside, and it's like a little safer.
Yeah, you know, like it was kind of like the thing that kind of kept going. I mean, you know, it stopped like when it needed to stop, but you know, it was kind of like the first thing that came back was like, let's go to the desert and like, you know, get wild again. But yeah, so like I continued with that crew for like a few years. And with that, I was like, my role with them was like stage production. So like sound and lighting and stuff.
Okay, so question for you. I had a friend on like several episodes ago, and he was talking about how, you know, he wants his contribution to the scene to be visuals and lasers. Yeah. He's not very musically inclined. And we had this whole conversation about like, well, I think maybe you might need like certifications or licensing to be a laser operator. Is that true?
For lasers, you do, yeah.
Okay.
Like lasers are like, if it kind of depends on, well, it's really about the power of the laser.
Okay.
If you buy, you know, something from like Guitar Center or something, they like, you know, limit the like output so that it's not dangerous, you know, so like anybody can just like set it up in like a, you know, and like use it, and like it won't like blind people. But once you start getting into the actual like professional quality lasers grade that, you know, can shoot for like miles and miles, like, yeah, you have to be certified to use them. And like, in order to deploy them outside, you have to get like sign off from, and that has to be like really regulated. Like you can't just like go out to the desert and just like shoot a laser, because like it's like what I've been told and like what I've like seen and stuff is that there's this like fear, and like you know, the 1 in 10 million chance that this ever happens, but there's this fear that, you know, because these lasers can go for miles and miles, they can like shoot up into the sky and like hit like an airplane pilot or something, and like blind a pilot and then like crash a plane and stuff like that. So they have to, like, if you do deploy a laser outside, it always has to be shooting into like a backdrop that like stops, you know, the laser from just going, you know, into infinity.
So then you can't go up either, right?
Yeah, it's have to be kind of like level. And like, you know, if you go to, I mean, like, I don't know, gosh, my first thought was like snow globe, but like if you go like, you know, cause I remember going to snow globe like years ago, and, you know, they had lasers and stuff, but they were always like shooting into like the tree canopy.
Got it.
Like, you know, it didn't have to be like an actual like structure, but just like something that stops the laser from going in, you know, into just space. But yeah, no, it's like a thing. And yeah, like I've been, another like part of me is I assist at the Globe Theater, like downtown.
Hell yeah. So many parties there.
Yeah. Just like my buddies essentially like run production there. And so like I help out like whenever they need an extra hand with like, again, either sound, lighting, or just like, you know, stage hand, just helping set up for bands and whatnot. But yeah, like when they got their lasers installed there, they had to have like a certified technician like come in and like aim them properly and like restrict their like, you know, span, so they don't just like go up into the crowd or go down low. And it's like, yeah, it's like it's a thing.
By the way, shout out to Simon. Check out that episode.
Shout out Simon.
But question. So it though, like, or not question. Though if you did have lasers at a renegade party, sort of, and it got busted, I feel like the last of your problems would be like, who's the certified laser operator?
Certified laser op here. Yeah. I doubt you probably have more pressing things to worry about than your laser certification.
Probably a lot more going on.
But
agreed. Definitely don't want to blind anyone. So I wonder, I don't know if you've ever been to Burning Man, but there's definitely a lot of lasers out there, and I can't imagine that those are
I don't know.
Sanctioned.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess they're just it's so far away from
you're just in the middle
civilization that's just I don't know. But I'm trying to go this coming year. I was actually going to apply to be a part of a build team for Alchemist.
I mean, because you're a production guy, that would be perfect.
Yeah, so that's kind of I don't know. I've always heard. I don't know if you've been
once,
but I've always heard when you first start going, you kind of want to join an already established camp and kind of do their thing. I have a bunch of friends who are trying to go for the first time. We can start our own camp, or we can just get an RV or whatever. And I'm just you could do that, but also joining the build team for a really dope established camp would be super cool.
I think there's pro and con either way. So I went with my then girlfriend, and initially we were going to be part of a camp. Mm-hmm. Actually, it was called Pink Lightning, was the one that runs a marathon at Burning Man every year.
Jeez.
But there was really terrible, right?
Oh my gosh.
And there was so much obligation around that, including to the extent possible, you don't have to run the marathon, but if you can kind of walk along the path and hand out water. Yeah. And it was just a little much. It's okay, we're going to be surviving in the most arid, inhospitable desert to begin with. Granted, they're offering some amount of infrastructure, but also a lot of work.
Yeah.
So we ended up we just did solo, the two of us just set up our own camp. And I think there were definitely pros and cons to that. Because so on the one hand, total freedom. You don't have to answer to anybody. You can do anything you want anytime.
Yeah.
Zero obligation. And then the downside is infrastructure. So an established camp will probably have a shower and, established
maybe a group kitchen or something. Yeah, exactly.
That.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're down to build, they'll just keep in mind, it's hot as fuck. And it's the dryness and the alkalineness of the dust out there is sort of beyond anything. You're so parched that, even if you just accidentally scratch or graze your hand against something, you'll scratch it and you'll
break
start
your skin.
bleeding.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I don't know if you know Anton Tomas.
Yes.
He runs Subtract Music. Yeah.
I was actually going to bring him up because I feel like you guys kind of share that in terms of, he has his Danley system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Contracts out.
Yeah. So I was, bring him up because he does the sound for the Ply Alchemist camp that I wanted to be a part of.
Fantastic.
And stuff. Yeah, he deploys a massive Danley system out there, and I've seen him boasting about it in the past, and so he was actually the one who shared their Instagram posts about now accepting applications or whatever.
Team. Yeah, I saw that.
So I was oh my gosh, this sounds fantastic. Because again, I have my own equipment and stuff too, but what you just mentioned about the alkaline nature of the dust and stuff out there, it just wrecks any electronics. And so I'm I'm not really trying to bring my super expensive electronics out to the desert. I'll just I'll let Anton bring his speakers out. I'll just help him set up,
Right. Or people bring in their CDJs and mixers and shit.
People, artists will bring out their laptops to perform.
Yeah.
I'm oh my
I'm coming out there with a cheap controller, you know?
And wrap it in cellophane wrap or something to before you get out there and just oh my gosh, yeah.
So Anton's an interesting example because I've actually been trying to bring him on, which hopefully we can make happen eventually.
Yeah.
But I I respect that he's equally known in the scene for being a sound guy as he is for being a DJ.
Yeah.
And it all sort of feeds his ecosystem, right? Because he's meeting all of these DJs doing sound at these events, and then a lot of them end up becoming or headlining at Subtract. And then it's a great avenue for him to just promote his own DJ career. And I don't think he's trying to be an international touring guy, but in terms of throwing parties that are very well attended that, he gets to play for people for hours at a time. I think he's definitely got it down in terms of
Yeah. I'd say that's something that I kind of get like a similar vibe from, people like him and like Marcus Wyatt, doing like deep LAs, like, they definitely strive for like quality over quantity. It's like they're not trying to, be these like big, like Insomniac parties with like tens of thousands of people coming out or whatever. It's like we do what we do it well.
Yeah.
And like, we like, it's, just, quality, like every time, like you show up, like, what to expect. It's going to be great. It's going to be great sound, great music, great people. Like, cause that's the kind of the thing, like with the event industry is like, I mean, it's kind of like every industry, but like the more you scale up, you sacrifice quality, and, especially with, sound too. And I mean, events, and this is something that like I've talked to a few of my friends about who also do like their own like smaller event production things, like whether it's desert parties or warehouse parties and stuff. And it's kind of different philosophies of like, their long-term kind of like growth plans and stuff. And like some people, are like, we're trying to be the next, Dulab or the next, Shambhala or like this thing and like really grow. And like, I respect that hustle and that, like just dedication to like, providing like this big experience. But then there's others, and like I kind of fall more along in this line of like, similar to Anton or Marcus, where we just want to curate like just really special and like intimate events. And just like, because again, like, and for me, that like just comes down to, I guess, two main things. One is the nerdy side of like the sound, because sound, the more you scale up, the more you sacrifice quality. Just, like to try to cover larger audiences. There's all these
right, and then there's
super
like
technical
delays
things,
and stuff, right?
Like delay towers, or you get into like different like, like really to scale up, you need to start getting into like line source, and like that's just like comes with all different like compromises and stuff. So like, what Anton does with his Danleys, and what Danleys are known for is like, point source, which is like more of like a accurate representation of sound. You do with less issues and stuff like that, but you can only scale up so large with point source. And then it's also just like, the ease of deployment, and these things weigh hundreds of pounds, and like you have to rent generators. And
just
all
the
this
labor
stuff,
alone,
labor costs, transport costs, and like storage costs. It all just like takes a lot. And then also the second side of that is the actual like atmosphere, which is something that like I'm really kind of like sensitive to, because like I'm not the most like social person. Like I like get social anxiety and stuff like that. Like I don't really like being at large festivals and just like lost in the sea of people and stuff. I see you. And like for me to like have a good time, like I need to feel like it's a safe space. I know that sounds like cheesy, but and that's the thing, like when you start throwing festivals or events for thousands of people, like you don't know who's going to show up, like anybody can show up, right? Any sketchy person, like even some of the desert parties I've been involved with, where there's like even just like 500 people there, get some like sketchy people, and like some randos show up, like who knows that guy, like he's like harassing people, right, or whatever, and like being able to curate like an environment like Anton or Marcus do, like that's something that like I respect a lot more. And like, again, like what I kind of like, like idolize, I guess. Right. And like, that's something that like I always try to do, because, you can create these spaces by, keeping it intimate, keeping it smaller. It's not like exclusivity of like, invite only lists or whatever, but it's just making sure that everybody who's there is being held accountable for each other, and we're all like got each other's backs, and, it's a safe space for everybody.
Yeah. And I think like, ultimately, I think what those guys do is they've cultivated a crowd that's really about the music.
Exactly. Yeah.
And of course, like obviously because it's rave, there's a fair amount of kind of drug component as well. But people are, people who participate in those parties are definitely like the music crowd, right? It's like kind of like the KCRW meets the. Like,
that's yeah. And that's like that's another thing too that I've like been aware of. And I think you've mentioned I can't remember which episode I was watching. I think it might have been with Nectar, where you're talking about just like the kind of shift in the scene that you've seen throughout your you know, like you're like, is, you know, like I think you asked like, you know, does Plur still exist or whatever, you know, and like that's kind of a thing that I've seen is like there is a bit of a shift towards
shout out to Nectar, by the way.
More shout out to Nectar. Where like, you know, to some extent, some groups or whatever, a little bit more about like the party of it and, you know, music. To kind of quote one of my other friends, you know, music is just kind of like the soundtrack to their drug trip, you know, but it's just kind of like, oh, like it's just making the atmosphere for the party, but it's not like the reason why you attend the event. Yeah.
Well, I had my buddy Daniel on last week and we kind of digested, the Sasha party we had gone to at Sound, and while his set was phenomenal, you know, we walked away feeling the vibe was like not good in terms of just what you're talking about, you know, just people who they just want to be at a club, they're out to be at a club, and who's on the DJ booth is just sort of incidental. At the same time, like, I guess that's okay. Like, I don't want to be like such a hater, like music nerd, where it's like, you know, you have to know. I feel that way personally, I guess. Like, that's my sort of instinct emotionally. But, you know, I do try to, I'm trying to take a step back and be like, look, if somebody just wants to be out and like enjoy bottle service and listen to some beats, I guess that's okay. But to your point, like, I would prefer to be at an event where somebody is curating it, you know, a little more closely so that, you know, the vibe is sort of very finely tuned.
Yeah. And that's like, so like, after that desert party, like the Jackson Collective that I did for a few years, I was also helping run this like underground warehouse kind of space up in North Hollywood, which is actually like really close to Icon, apparently. Like I didn't know at the time, but so we got a lot of like Icon kids like coming through and like partying and stuff. And then I met some other people through that I invited out to the desert parties and got them introduced. And then like they started doing their own desert parties. And I kind of like, you know,
everyone's just doing their own
sat down with them to like give them advice. Cause they're like, hey, like you run sound for, you know, Jackson Tree. All right. Can we like pick your brain? And like, you know, we're trying to do our own thing. And like through those, like I've maintained like really solid friendships. One of them is called, the party's called Into Dust, and they do like really well curated music and stuff too. My buddy Derek Nielsen, shout out Derek. He has his own like little Danley rig.
All right, so
another like really passionate guy.
So do you own your own rig too that you?
I do now, yeah. Okay. So that's been like my longest journey because I grew up pretty like lower middle class, especially for like Marin County, which is always like, oh, you're from Marin, you must be like rich. I'm like, no, dude, like. No.
Okay, yeah, because I mean that's certainly like the reputation that the place has.
Yeah, you know, it's like always rated like top 10, whatever, like wealthiest
George
places
Lucas lived there.
I've worked at Lucasfilms for doing like the bartending stuff back in the day. I was pretty cool actually. Like got to see like the Industrial Light and Magic, which is like special effects division of.
Oh, awesome.
So I got to see like all like the little models of like the like AT walkers and like the Millennium Falcon and stuff, and like the sound stages that they like filmed all these things on.
Right.
But yeah, no. So I just recently started my own company. Finally, doing sound. It's just like this. It's just kind of this accumulation of knowledge and experience throughout. You know, that initial like DJ lesson from my uncle has all come together, and like you know my experience like working at the Globe Theater, working you know like more corporate event production. You know, all of desert parties, all the things, like just getting my hands on wherever I can get my hands on.
So where do you store the rig? Like at home or?
No, I have a storage unit, which is actually like kind of a disaster right now. And like, I need to find a new place because it's a lot of stuff. But yeah, no, so I have like a public storage unit, which is not great. So
people reach out to you, they want to throw a party, like how far in advance?
Yeah. I mean, ideally like a month in advance.
Okay.
It kind of depends on the event. Like if it's like a desert party that like I'm familiar with already, like the other desert party that you saw, like I did a Void acoustics deployment over the summer. That was for a desert party called Vibey Desert. They're more like bass music focused. Super great group of guys. Like they again like are the type who like really care about like the atmosphere that they curate. But yeah, like the music is always just like really on point and just like really care about like the production quality. Sorry, where was I going with that? Vibey Desert. Oh yeah. So like, you know, like I'd be communicating with them like, you know, months in advance about their party. Cause like, you know, they do it annually. So like I know about their gig and they always like, you know, we're always like scheming months in advance and I help out with like, you know, their stage construction and stuff as well.
Okay. How big, like how many attendants or attendees?
This past year was a little bit lighter. Just cause of like the timing of like COVID and stuff was still kind of like when things were just coming back. Right. And it was also like in the middle of summer. So it was like super hot and people weren't really trying to go out to the desert. But I think that one got like between like 200 and 300 people.
Wow. So like pretty big,
pretty decent size. Yeah. There was 2 stages. My friend, Kevin, who runs a Synchronistic Sound, he has like a Hennessy rig, which is like really popular with like the bass music side of things. Okay. Like that's kind of like what it's designed for. He does sound for like all of like the bass,
like tipper
like,
and shit.
Yeah, and like you know like that kind of thing. Like I don't know if you ever heard of Bass Waffles.
I think so. Yeah.
It's like this like little thing in Highland Park. They've been doing it for like years now. It's always like on a Sunday night.
I haven't heard of this. It's a party in Highland Park.
Yeah, it's called. Yeah, their thing is like fat bass and free waffles. Okay. Yeah. Again, like super great group of guys. But yeah, so he's kind of their like in-house like sound guy and like does all their events and then does you know like lost and found events and things like that, like just all like the bass heavy stuff, like he's like really predominant there.
So are you like at liberty to disclose kind of what would it cost for a setup for, you know?
It really depends because it's not like a typical, you know, just like, oh, you go to Guitar Center, it's like pick up the kit and, you know, like you set up yourself and just like drop it off when you're done. It's like a hired service. It's not like a rental. So like what you really, I mean, like, yes, you're paying for, you know, the speakers, but you're also paying for like the labor cost, the transportation cost, the entire thing, like the tuning. So it really depends if it's like, you know, like a local event, if it's like driving out to the desert where you need, you know, and like if you need to like rent a U-Haul or like, you know, you need to rent a generator. Right. So there's all these different things. So it's kind of hard to like give just like a, you know, like it's this much for a night, or if it's like a single night, if it's like a whole weekend, like, you know, like all that stuff. But it's like ballpark, like on the very low end, like $500 a night, like on like the upper end, like $2,000 a night. Okay. Again, depending on like how much equipment, like if you need to like, you know, hire extra hands to help the setup, break down, you rent U-Hauls, whatever. But yeah, and like that's another thing too that people don't really like plan for, I guess, is that it does take a lot more to set up like a proper sound deployment than just like plugging in some speakers. Yeah,
because you need the Jennies, right? I'm sure you're bringing amps and shit.
Yeah. It's all like, yeah, when you get into like a proper pro audio market, like all the speakers are like passive, like they don't have like built-in amplifiers. So you have like your amp rack that you bring and like your signal processing, all that stuff. And then, you know, you got like your actual like cabinets. And then if you're like flying them or you're ground stacking, there's different like, you know, rigging equipment that you need to like strap it all down so it doesn't like blow over in the wind, which has happened multiple times at I mean, it happens all the time at Burning Man where like big speaker stacks blow over and just get completely wrecked.
I've definitely seen that.
But yeah, it's like, it's a lot of work. I mean, you know, like Vibey Desert, we were out there. I mean, I was there for 4 days leading up to the event, but like the core team was out there for an entire week leading up to the event, like building the stages, setting up, you know, getting the sound all like dialed in and stuff.
So is your setup the Void rig or
no? So that's a buddy of mine. It's 2 guys. They run like, or like one of them runs this like a tech house label called Rock Bottom Records. Okay. And they're a little bit more of like a Dirty Bird kind of sound.
Got it.
But yeah, they acquired this Void rig like mid-pandemic. It was like a pandemic liquidation kind of like. They were like, dude, this is like a super good deal. They hit me up and were like, what do you think? We've been like looking at getting a sound system. Like, you need to get your advice again. Yeah, so I gave them like the kind of advice on like what they're getting themselves into and all that stuff. Honestly, kind of like, and like they know this. I'm not like kind of tried to like steer them away. I was like, look, it's like a lot of work. Like it's not like, I know voids look super cool. Like I love voids. Like, you know, the Globe Theater has a full void install. So like I've worked with voids for like a while, but I'm like, voids are like the like Ferrari of speakers. Like they look pretty, but they're so finicky. They're not easy to like operate.
Yeah. Like, do you have a venue or like a system that you think is like the bee's knees? Like, cause the Danleys are pretty fucking dope.
The Danley is probably like, if somebody were to be like, I want to get into like pro audio, I don't know that much, I would definitely steer them towards Danley, because Danley is like like the most kind of like plug and play you can get, because they are just like so well designed like in the cabinet that they don't really require a whole lot of like additional processing to get them to sound very good. You can more or less just like, you know, set them up and then like plug them in and like they'll sound pretty good, and like they're pretty forgiving. Whereas like voids are very unforgiving. You can get them to sound really great, but with like a little bit of, you know, mistuning, you can get them to sound really bad too.
Yeah. Like, is function 1 still the big daddy, like the granddaddy?
No.
Okay.
Function 1.
Let's hear it.
Was created, and like this is such like a controversial topic, because people like, there's such fanboys of Function 1.
Yeah, I mean, whenever someone like puts on their flyer, like we'll have,
and they're so recognizable.
System. I'm like, okay,
and it's because they, you know, when they came out was in the early 90s. Like that's when Function 1 was created as a company. When Tony left Turbo Sound to start Function 1. He took some of his like patents and the designs with him.
Okay,
Tony Andrews.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a big sound. Like a known
he's
sound
like the
guy.
founder of Function 1. He's like, you know, the lead designer and everything. Okay. So back then when it was created, it was like revolutionary. Like nobody had done something that he was doing at the time, and you know, that's kind of how they built up their reputation. But unfortunately, they haven't really innovated since then. So they've been kind of just like riding on that wave of reputation as like, we are this like iconic, you know, club thing that we've been installed all these, you know, venues since the 90s and all that stuff. But technology has surpassed them.
Yeah, because whenever I hear that subtract system, I'm pretty fucking
the Danleys. And what makes the Danleys unique is, to get like even more nerdy, is the thing with like all speakers, even the ones that I own, which I love my speakers. They're by a new like up and coming innovator called Traction Sound, also a UK based company. Okay. Love the team there. They're awesome guys. Like, I mean, that's why I invested in them. Cause like essentially like if I could design a speaker, it would be what they're already doing. So yeah, but the thing with Danley was like their like patented technology is, and Tom Danley like used to work for NASA. Like he used to like do these things where he would like create these little chambers using opposing sound waves to like levitate objects. So you can essentially like create like a zero gravity atmosphere, so you can like manipulate things. Like, wow. But yeah, so he's just insane genius. But he created this technology, which is like called synergy horn technology, which is like what all of their like tops are. And the difference between that versus any other speaker, like Function, Void, Traction, and like Meyer, like all the top brands, is everything else for your different frequency ranges, you know, your mids, lows, highs, is different drivers all radiating from different like areas on an enclosure. You know, like, you know, your KRKs, they have a woofer and a tweeter. Right. So, you know, like that's two different origins of sound. And so when those two, like I always kind of like try to use this metaphor of like water, and imagine dropping, you know, like two different pebbles in a, you know, like in a pond. Those two waves ripple outwards and then collide with each other and then bounce off. Whereas if it was one ripple, that is like a nice ripple, you know, during its entire development. So with any speaker that has multiple sources, you get these like collisions in the environment, and it causes issues with the acoustics. Whereas what Danley does with his synergy horn is he has developed a way to have all of the, or like, so it's a three-way speaker. So the mids, lows, and highs all fire into the same horn through these like specially tuned slots. And so they all arrive into the atmosphere at the same exact time. So it essentially, so it's like the truest form of like a point source, because it's one point of radiation. So you avoid all of those like inner driver
so like a single point from which all the sound that you're hearing is emanating.
It is true, like a single point. And so that's what creates their like clarity and their definition, and why you're able to stand 100 feet back and still hear every instrument, like and especially like the separation with the instruments. It doesn't sound just like a big like muddy like wave coming at you. It's really like a special thing.
Oh man, we'll have to talk further, because like my friends, they want to buy a system, because every time they throw a party, we have another friend who owns a turbo system up north, but he's got to like drive it down from NorCal every time, and it's like we should have a SoCal sound system. But I was looking into it, I was like, I don't even know where to begin.
It's a lot, and like that's something that like has always interested me, even like when I first started DJing in high school, is like, like if I'm spending my money on something, like what am I getting? Like why is this speaker $300 and that speaker $600? And I really started like diving into like spec sheets and like reading the differences and then my friend, when I was doing the like Jackson Tree parties, one of my buddies who like works at the Globe, he has a Danley system. He brought it out, and that was my introduction to Danley. So I was like, what is this? And then like dove even further into like my self-research and stuff. And then that's how I actually discovered the company that I now invested in my personal system. Because what they do differently is their focus is actually on like the fidelity and like musicality of the system, and not just trying to be like, we're super loud, we can like, rip your face off with sound and like cover these, like 10,000 people audiences. Like their focus is, again, like with my philosophy with events, is quality over quantity. And so like that goes into, their choice of components, everything from the processing to the amplification to the driver selection is all for like fidelity and like low listener fatigue. So you can stand in front of the speakers for 8 hours and not like, make your ears bleed.
Your ears aren't bleeding,
and you can like leave and, not be like, what did I do to myself? And like you have your ears ringing throughout the night, and that's something that I strive for all the time with any event that I work, is hearing safety as well, which I feel like I always have kind of issues with, because especially when I go to like warehouse parties where it's not like a regulated thing. With most like proper event, like above ground events, there are like regulations put in place for hearing safety and stuff. And actually this was an issue at Dirty Bird this last weekend, where it's like so heavily regulated that it actually like negatively impacted the sound. Because
that was last weekend, Dirty Bird.
It's just like an issue with the venue, which like I've had conversations with like people too. It's like, why do you choose a venue that like restricts the noise so much that like you can't even enjoy the music? It's like I was telling my friend, I was like, yes, it's like having like a race at like a track that sets a speed limit. It's like, what are you doing? Like you can't act, like you can't do what you're supposed to be doing there. But yeah, like with the underground, there's no regulation and of like sound or hearing safety. So like I show up these things, and it's like, in order to like protect yourself from long-term hearing damage, you need to like stuff your ears with like foam earplugs, and it's like you can't even hear the music. It's like, what's the point? So that's something that
I will say I have noticed like of late my hearing starting to deteriorate because of like
it's a scary thing. Like I don't know, I've always been like paranoid. I remember like the first time I got like like the temporary tinnitus was at Outside Lands, like I think like 2014 or something. And like, I left that festival and my ears were ringing. I was like, this is terrifying. Like what? And like, I was like, I never want to like, have this like be a permanent thing. And like, I know people who like have permanent tinnitus because of their careers, in bands or, whatever. And like, to me, it's like, I rely on my ears for everything that I do. Like music is the main driving force in my life. Like if I lose my hearing, I have no idea what I would do.
I've hit the point where the earplugs are non-negotiable. Like they're just a must. Like it used to be like, oh, but it doesn't sound as good and that whole thing. But now it's like, nope, they're not leaving. Like I need to protect what I have left. But question for you. So, how big is the ecosystem of people out there who do what you do in say the LA area, right? Because there's only really, I would say a dozen or so kind of really active promoters, like across like 6 a.m., Subtract, Dialogue, Culprit, down the list, right? So like, are there like as many people who do what you do for these promoters, or do they have their kind of go-to folks?
It's in terms of the ecosystem and the amount of people, like, I mean, in terms of like sound reinforcement, there's maybe like, I mean, it's hard because like, again, you know, I don't know everything. I'm still like, what the heck did that party come from? But in terms of like, to the kind of extent that like, you know, someone like me would do it, maybe like half a dozen people, in like the like greater LA, like county.
Cause I know of you and I know of Anton, like that's
me, Anton, you know, my buddy Kevin, who runs Synchronistic Sound, which is, you know, he's like just kind of corners the whole like bass, you know, scene. So, you know, and this is the thing that like each of us kind of has our own little like category, like our own little niche that we like, you know, target. Like, you know, my friends with the Void rig, their, you know, passion. And like, because this, what we do, like, it's not a good ROI. Like, it's not a good, like, I'm going to invest in this thing because it's like a money making business and I'm going to be rich.
Right.
Like, you do it because you love the scene and you want to contribute to make it better.
Of course.
And so like, if you're doing that and you're devoting time, you know, and your energy and your sleepless nights to this thing, you want to like be working for an event that you want to be at. You know, so like Kevin, he loves bass music. That's why he does, you know, he bought his Hennessy rig and does, you know, bass music events. Like, you know, Anton loves, you know, obviously loves his music, that kind of like burner,
like
you know,
house,
a little bit more like mature
house, playa tech.
Yeah, burner kind of playa tech, you know, crew. So that's what he does. My buddies with the Void rig, you know, they're all into, you know, that kind of more dirty bird, like tech house scene. And so like, that's what they do. You know, and like my, you know, like my passion is a little bit more of the, like, I guess like kind of nearing Anton's, like kind of that like playa techy kind of stuff, but not so like organic house, which is like why is that even a thing?
Like Adriatic?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit more like melodic, progressive, deep house and techno things, whatever.
I'm with you there.
But I mean, really just like whatever sounds good and makes you want to dance and like,
yeah, so like, are there any standout events that you've done sound for that you were like, that was a fucking amazing event, and I'm so happy to have been part of that? And I'm sure it must happen a lot, but are there any particular standouts?
I'm trying to think. Gosh, I mean,
yeah, we don't have to.
I don't know. I mean, most recently, like, and I know I've like brought them up, but the Vibey Desert guys, like, I'm just always impressed by their production, just overall, like, especially, you know, and because that is, and this is what's really cool about this community, and like, I don't know if this has always existed or because like, you know, the kind of shift in production, because there has been a shift in like production. And like, I don't know, like, you know, what kind of, like, again, if this has always existed, but there's really like a big sense of support within the community. Like, it is not, at least in the community that I know, it is not, you know, like, oh, I'm going to try to like take your event or like trying to undercut you to like steal your client or whatever. You know, we all exist in our separate niche, you know, a little like pods, but we all support each other. Like, you know, I help out Kevin when he needs help. He helps me out. We all like share advice and wisdom. Like one of my other friends, Brandon Hines, he runs Cognition events. They're another like warehouse, like techno party. He's another, you know, he like also DJs and produces and stuff too, but he has his own sound system and like, you know, sound reinforcement company. And he is like an absolute wizard. Like, he just knows so much about sound. Like, it is mind blowing. Like, this has been his entire life. It has been like sound. And you know, like, he was like, I had like a little debut, little party thing, last weekend. So I kind of like launched my little company, and he like came by, you know, and it was like, you know, like we were like chit chatting about just sound, and like, you know, he's offering his assistance to like, you know, teach me some like of like the processing side of things and whatnot. And like, it's just like, we're always just sharing wisdom to like just help better the community. And, you know, like that really exists at Vibe Desert. You know, like Kevin and I will communicate and like, you know, figure out sound. You know, he helps me, I help him, and like it just elevates the entire, you know, like event. And it also comes down to the actual music that is played through the systems, because they really, you know, they well curate that lineup really well. So like all the music just sounds really good through the systems.
Got it. And yeah, like have you? I mean, I'm sure that you have tons of DJs that you're sort of inspired by. Like, are there any particular events where you got to work with a DJ or some talent that you were like, oh shit, that was amazing?
Yeah. I'm really like, in terms of like performing, I mean, you know, I've been like just mixing tracks for, 15 years. So like, I like kind of lost my like passion for that type of performance like a couple years ago. And like, you know, like when I first moved down, I was like, I'm going to, you know, be a producer and do that. That's why I went to the school for production. And like, I tried to hustle to like get gigs and, you know, like at Exchange and whatever, and like Avalon, but like just the whole kind of like more corporate ethos of that like venture into the fame or whatever, just like totally turned me off. Cause like, it's all about like, how many tickets can you sell? Like you got to sell X amount of tickets. If you want to play the main stage, you got to like do this and that. And like, it's not about the music.
It's all economics.
Yeah. And like, I just had no interest in being involved in that. And then, you know, like, that's kind of what, you know, always drew me back to the underground. But then even still, it was just like, okay, now I'm going to like play this song, do this thing, beat match, can now like, you know, trim the bass, you know, trim the mids, do that. And it was just felt very routine. And I kind of like lost the like love of that type of performance.
No, that makes me sad to hear.
But what reignited it was when I started seeing, and this is kind of like getting more and more popular, is the more kind of like live hybrid things where, you know, people were bringing out their like, you know, drum machines and like maybe their, you know, modular synths or whatever, and like perform and not just like mix tracks. And that like really inspired me. And there's this really small, like super small event series that's been going on for, I don't even know how many years now. One of my teachers told me about it when I was in school. It's called Modular on the Spot.
Okay.
It's a modular synth picnic is kind of what they like brand themselves as. So it's just a bunch of just like nerdy sound design guys with their modular rigs, like go out, and they usually set up like in like a park or like on the bank of the LA River or like maybe on a beach or something. And it's usually like in the like later, you know, afternoon to evening kind of thing, usually like on a Sunday. It's always free. Just like bring a picnic blanket and, you know, like a 6-pack or whatever. And just like hang out and just listen to these guys just like jam on their like synths. And it's just like the coolest art and just like experience. And you're just like, it was me. I'm always just like blown away by like the creativity of what these people like are doing live and like that kind of thing. You know, and like, you know, people like, you know, like Richie Houghton and stuff, like the way he performs.
Or like, Dubfire kind of has it.
Yeah. Like, so like that has like really kind of like re-inspired like me in terms of like an artist and performance and stuff. And even, I mean, like I have this friend, his name's Andrew. He has like a modular rig, and like I've known him for many years, like through the desert scene and stuff. And like, he's been a big inspiration for me.
Oh yeah. Do you know Reagan? Robotech Reagan?
It's funny you mentioned that, because that was gonna be my next. It was Dance Spirit has been a huge inspiration for me. I didn't know about them like at all until I went to this like super random desert party that was just like a one-off thing.
Shout out to Reagan.
It happened once, and like I went because Evan Casey was on the lineup, and like, you know, that's like right in my alley of like, you know, that kind of like dark melodic techno stuff. So it's like, fuck yeah, Evan Casey, like at this like desert party. And this was like before Desert Hearts Black. So he was still like, you know, not like a super famous Desert Hearts DJ. And yes, like I went out and it was super small, like, and I had like kind of ran into him like kind of randomly at a like hotel rooftop party, whatever thing. Oh
yeah, like
he was like playing, and like this is back when he was doing his like Lost Dimensions like mix series on SoundCloud. I would always play those things, and like, you know, he was closing out the night, and like on his way out, I was with my girlfriend at the time, and like I was like trying to like get her to say hi. We're like totally fangirling over him, and I was like, oh my gosh, like we need to like say hi or something. And like I tried to convince her, she was like too embarrassed. And so like on our way out, we were like walking out of the venue, and I just like kind of like yelled over. I was like, Evan Casey, we fuck to your mixes. and he was like, yeah. And then he like got off this like the DJ booth, and then just like got into the elevator with us, and so we're like, oh shit, now we're trapped in this fucking elevator. Like I was hoping just like yell this thing and then just like leave,
awkward.
But now we're like stuck in this thing. We're like talking, but he was super cool. Like and then so like when I went out to this little desert thing, like, you know, a little bit later, he like recognized me and he was like, hey, like you're that guy. And so we're like chit chatting and stuff like after his set, because it was like me, him, and then like maybe like 2 or 3 of our friends just on like the dance floor. It was like, you know, 4 a.m. or something. And we were just like hanging out, and like, and then, you know, a couple of DJs played, and then Dance Spirit came on, and he was like, do you know these guys? And I was like, no, like, what are they? And he was like, he totally told them, he was like, they are incredible. Like you know, like stay up for this. Like they do all their live stuff, you know, like gave me the whole spiel, and great. Like, that I was just like mind blown.
They're great and like super nice guys. And Reagan lately is, I've seen on his gram, he's doing a lot of shit with modular synths with all the different wires and stuff.
So seeing their live performance, and like any other time since then that I could, you know, see them, like I saw them, like, you know, they played at Love Long Beach, whenever the last 2019.
That was like whatever. 2019.
Yeah. That was, you know, like again, just incredible set.
I mean, I'm sad they don't work together anymore. Chris and Reagan, but
yeah,
you know,
Chris is also great dude. Chris, I'm actually like I know him a little bit better through their Space Cadet magazine that they used to do. That was also like another huge inspiration for like just my creativity. But yeah, like I became kind of like loose, you know, kind of internet friends with Chris through that.
Same.
But yeah, just great dudes. But yeah, they're performing is another like huge inspiration. Right. I just love that, like, you know, because it's with the like, you know, streaming and Beatport and whatever, like all music is available to everybody. It's not as, you know, unless you're spinning like another, like all over the place, but Mesme is like, I don't know if you know Mesme, and awesome. Like what she does,
I
with
don't know
like,
her personally, but I've seen
just like such deep cuts that you're just like, what is this music? Like every time I see her, I like just Shazam like full time, and like nothing comes up. Like I've even told her, I was like, I just like Shazam your entire set, and like I'm so sad that nothing came up, because like that means I have to come to every.
I got a few. Well, the last time I saw her play at Into the Woods, I missed her Boiler Room.
Oh yeah.
Like a month ago.
I tried to buy tickets, but they're sold out like instantly.
Shout out to Mesme, you got to come on, please. I've hit her up like a few times, and it's just like radio silence. But I think that's kind of part of her allure too, right? I looked at her RA profile, and like the whole narrative is like nobody knows who she is or where she came from.
Yeah, I've kind of like interacted with her a couple of times at some of her like smaller. You know, when she like plays at the Lash or whatever, like on a Tuesday night, and there's like 10 people there, I'm like able to like kind of go to the booth and like say hi and whatever. She's super friendly, but yeah, like I can imagine, like, you know, also just probably gets hit up by a bunch of dudes on social media. So
that's too.
But yeah, but I bring her up because, you know, it's kind of two different like categories. Like someone like her who is, you know, like a DJ, but like in the purest form of like this like true like deep cut DJ, where like you can't easily just like find that music on like Beatport, like top 10, you know, tech house tracks or whatever. And then the other side of that is, you know, someone like Dance Spirit or, you know, these other like artists are coming up who are doing more of the live stuff. Cause like both of those just give you like such a special and like just one-time experience. Cause, you know, like everybody's a DJ, you know, like everybody can go on Beatport and like download some tracks and like throw it into a set list and like, oh, I've heard that song before, but, to like, you know, make yourself stand out, amongst the crowd. You gotta be doing something unique and like, yeah, I don't know, kind of.
Agreed.
Those are like, some like big inspirations and into the woods and doing some crazy stuff.
Their party's great.
They've been getting some serious talent.
Well, with that, man, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. You know, I feel like I definitely sense a kindred spirit in terms of kind of like music nerd, you know, electronic music nerd. So, you know, I feel like we could keep going on for like hours.
We'll cut it.
But thanks so much for coming on. And I guess number one, if you want to kind of plug your socials or your business.
Let the
people know where they can find you.
Yeah, my socials is my kind of like artist alias, which is my middle name, Collin Reeve, Reeve. And then through there, you'll see like the links to my like sound reinforcement company that I just started, which is Loud Laboratory. Again, like focused on like the musicality and fidelity of and like hearing safety and all that stuff, and just trying to like do the best to the scene to do the music justice.
Hell yeah!
It's like, you know, that's the worst when you like go out to experience music and it sounds better in your living room than it does at the venue. You're like, why am I here?
It's the important part that like people don't think about, right? But I've been to a ton of parties where the music was great, but the sound was not, and it just didn't, you know, it really killed the vibe. So. Loud Laboratory, Collin Reeve. Thank you for having me on and letting me spiel my spiel. Yeah, man. All right, folks. Well, don't forget to like and subscribe to Side Note on YouTube. You can also follow us on the gram at Side Note Media. You can follow me at Decoy Nick. And until next time.